Hey everybody, hope you guys are healthy and safe. So this is the iPhone 13 Pro Max and the iPhone 13 Mini. These are two of the four new iPhones that Apple's introduced. I have all four. So in this video, I'm going to take both of these phones out for an evening for a couple hours, kind of like a real day in the life usage of both of these phones. But first, let me introduce the four iPhones because a lot of people seem to be disappointed. They think this is a really modest, minor upgrade because the phones look exactly the same as last year's 12 series. Now, I wouldn't completely disagree. I do think there's more than meets the eye in terms of improvements for the iPhone 13 series. For example, the video you're watching right now, you should be seeing a little bit of natural bokeh around me. It looks a little bit better than a smartphone video, right? Well, this is actually shot with the iPhone 13 Pro, and it is completely handheld right now. So I am using a Bluetooth wireless mic to help with audio, but other than that, what you're watching is unedited footage straight from the iPhone. In fact, I'm going to try to shoot the entire video, the parts of me talking to the camera with just the iPhone. So if there's a B-roll shot by another camera, I'll put a little red star in the corner. So when you see a little red star, that means it's not iPhone footage. If you don't see that little red star, that means you're watching iPhone footage like right now. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the differences between these two phones. So the good news this year is that it's a little bit easier to tell the differences. So the 13 Pro Max and the 13 Pro that's filming right now are exactly the same other than screen size and battery size. Likewise, the 13 Mini, it's exactly the same as the standard 13 other than screen size and battery size. So when I talk about the differences between these two phones, that means there are also the differences between the 13 Pro and the standard 13. So the first difference everyone will notice is the Pro phones have an extra camera, a 12 megapixel 3x telephoto zoom lens, whereas the non-Pro phones do not have a zoom lens. So what does that mean? That means when I am zooming, the Pro phones can zoom a lot better. The Pro phone zoom is actually a 3x optical zoom lens this year, and you can go 15x digital zoom, and it's much improved for an iPhone zoom. Now, it's not going to be as nice as a Galaxy S21 Ultra, but it is much better. You see right now, this is 15x zoom, optically stabilized. When you drop down to like 8x, it actually looks pretty clean. Now on the non-Pro phones, you can only go up to 5x max, and it probably doesn't look that good at 5x already because there's no zoom lens at all. Look at this natural creamy bokeh around the phone right now. This is just completely shot with an iPhone 13 Pro. I'll talk about that pretty soon though. So that's the first difference. The second difference is the Pro phones have Pro Motion, which is what Apple calls 120 Hz refresh rate. So on the Pro phones, the screen refreshes at up to 120 Hz. The standard non-Pro iPhone only has refresh rate up to 60 Hz. So the third difference is the Pro phones have stainless steel frames, whereas the non-Pro phones have aluminum frames. The fourth difference is although all the iPhone 13s run on Apple's A15 Bionic, the Pro phones has an extra core and GPU. So that means if you're a heavy gamer or you edit videos on a phone, the Pro model should handle matters a little bit better than the standard non-Pro. But to be honest, I ran Geekbench numbers and they are very, very similar. So the final difference is the two cameras, the main camera and the ultra-wide cameras, are also improved over the non-Pro phones. Last year, that wasn't the case. So the Pro phone's main camera, 12 megapixel, has a larger image sensor than the camera here. To be honest, when you're shooting photos during the day under good sunlight, you're not really going to see a difference. The only difference you're going to notice is if you take a picture really up close to something, you will see that the Pro model has slightly better bokeh than the non-Pro models. And obviously when you're shooting at night, the Pro model's camera, because it has a larger image sensor, will take in a little bit more light than the non-Pro phones. So that's about it as far as differences between these two phones. Everything else is going to be very, very similar except for battery life, obviously. This is going to have much better battery life than this one. But let's talk about this cinematic mode that the iPhone 13 Pro is using to film me right now, because I actually think this is a game changer. So basically this is portrait mode for video. It is doing an artificial bokeh depth of field to separate me from the background. Now it doesn't work perfectly, it doesn't look as good as a real camera obviously, but it does add a little bit more depth to smartphone videos, because smartphone videos tend to look a little bit flat compared to when you're shooting with a real camera. And one of the coolest things is whatever the blur you see right now can be adjusted after the video. So after the video, I can dial it down a little bit, I can dial it up a little bit, or I can turn off the blur completely. And also, cinematic mode is smart enough to detect faces. So one of the coolest features is if there's someone next to me and I look over at that person, the focus will shift to that person. So for example, if there's two person in frame, if person A is in focus, but then person A turns to look at person B, then the focus will shift to person B. And then when person A turns his or her head back around, the focus will shift back to person A. And everything can be adjusted after the fact, like the degree of blur, and you can also change the focus point. And also this works not just on human faces, but also dogs and object. Honestly, I feel like this is a game changer, particularly for me, because I shoot some of my B-rolls with an iPhone, and I'm not the only one. Even Mr. Mobile, he admits that a lot of the footage you see in his videos are shot with an iPhone, because the iPhone to this day still has the best video camera in terms of stabilization, fluidity when zooming in and out, and stuff like this. A convincing artificial bokeh. Okay, one last comparison before we head out. So we need to look at the differences between the iPhone 13 Pro and the iPhone 12 Pro. So you'll see the camera module in the 13 Pro, it's quite a bit larger than the camera module in the 12 Pro because the 13 Pro has larger image sensors all around. And also, if you flip it to the front, the notch of the 13 Pro is a little bit smaller than the notch in the 12 Pro. Anyway, let's head out. Okay, let's keep track of battery life. So it is 6:37 p.m. right now. Battery life is at 77%. I can tell the 13 Pro Max's battery life is actually pretty good because I've been using this phone for about 5 hours already and it only dropped 23% so far. But we'll begin tracking 77%, 6:37. So right now I'm not using cinematic mode, I'm just shooting with normal video mode, but there's still a little bit of bokeh because the camera sensor, it's larger. It's 1.9 micron pixel. Okay, and then now this is a selfie camera. By the way, the sound you're hearing is from the wireless mic, so the iPhone's audio is not that good, but we can test it, Okay, now this is a selfie camera with just the built-in mic inside the iPhone because I've unplugged the wireless mic, so this is just the built-in mic now. Okay, so there's no step here, I just have to jump off. We'll check stabilization with the iPhone then. Whoa. Okay, this is main camera footage. Look how smooth the zoom is in and out. Okay, let's compare the cameras of these two too at night. So you notice that on the smaller 13 mini, night mode already kicked in automatically, whereas on the Pro Max, night mode is not needed yet because the 13 Pro Max and the 13 Pro have larger image sensors. So when you're shooting with night mode, it means you have to hold still for like 1 or 2 seconds. If you move in the middle of taking, the shot might turn out blurry. So it's still beneficial when you don't have to use night mode. Now when you switch to ultra wide, the difference should be even greater because the 13 Pro Max has a faster aperture. Now keep in mind, the Mini's camera is exactly the same as the 13, and the Pro Max camera is exactly the same as the 13 Pro. So even though I'm just comparing these two phones, the comparison applies to standard 13 versus 13 Pro too. Okay, so the video footage you're watching right now is shot with the iPhone 13 Pro. So right now it's a relatively dark part, so you can see the iPhone's nighttime video performance is pretty good. So while we're seated here, so that's one of the annoying things about the iPhone still. I'm wearing a mask and Face ID does not work. So I wish Apple would just put a damn in-display fingerprint sensor in there. Anyway, we'll compare these two cameras a little bit more in low light performance, and I also have an S21 Ultra that I'm going to rip out for more testing too. Let's compare selfie cameras of the 13 Pro Max and the S21 Ultra. So night mode kicks in automatically for both phones. And also there's just more consistency across cameras when you shoot with an iPhone. So this is a photo capture with the S21 Ultra on the right and the iPhone 13 Pro Max on the left. So both of these are with the main camera. You can argue the S21 Ultra has a better shot. It's a little bit punchier, it's a little bit better lit, dynamic range, it pops a little bit more. But then when you switch to the ultra wide lens, you'll see that the S21 Ultra's colors completely changes from the main camera to the ultra wide camera. They look like they were taken by two different cameras. But on the iPhone, the main camera and the ultra wide, it's a lot more consistent in terms of colors, dynamic range, balance, all of that. Now I know Android fans are going to be mad at me right now. I just want to clarify that for the most part, I still choose to carry an Android phone as my daily driver. And because I shoot a lot of zoom photos, I still prefer the camera systems of an S21 Ultra or Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra over an iPhone. But you want to shoot videos or just have more consistency across all your images, the iPhone is still the way to go. And that is why a lot of YouTubers, including me and Mr. Mobile and several others, use an iPhone as our B-roll footage machine. Like we shoot our main videos with a main camera, but then on the go footage we shoot with an iPhone because the iPhone is good enough. Particularly now that you can apply a little bit of fake bokeh to it and it looks kind of convincing enough. Edge detection can be a little bit off sometimes, but for the most part it just looks aesthetically pleasing compared to a typical flat smartphone video. Okay, time to check battery. So I started tracking at 6:37 at 77%. It is now 7:37, so exactly 1 hour later, and battery is at 70%. So that means in 1 hour of heavy use, remember I was filming this non-stop, the phone only dropped 7% battery. That is really good. If you've watched my other day in the life videos, every time I use an Android with 120 Hz, like the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra, or like a S21 Ultra, in 1 hour heavy use, the battery drops like 15%, 12%. So the fact that this drops 7% is really damn good. And like I said, I started using the phone today at around 1 p.m. So I've been using this 6.5 hours now, and battery is still at 70%. So battery for this is going to be really good. So ultimately, I think if you've been happy with previous iPhones, you should be very happy with the iPhone 13 series too. I think people's disappointments have been a little bit overblown. I actually think the new camera improvements are pretty big because having a larger image sensor just makes a big difference. You get more natural bokeh when you're taking photos. You know, night shots, you pull in more light naturally, you don't need to turn on night mode. And then ultimately, I'm a big fan of cinematic mode, adding that, you know, a little bit of blur to videos. But at the same time, a lot of the complaints I've had with the iPhones are still here. For example, the 13 Pro Max is a really huge screen, 6.7 inches, and this is a 6.1 inch screen, but the grids are exactly the same, meaning you can't put more apps onto this iPhone than this iPhone, because instead of showing you more content, the iPhone is just showing you larger content. Everything's just stretched out. I feel like if you give us such a large screen, then let us take advantage of it. Give us split screen multitasking. Allow us to put more apps onto the home screen. Why are we still locked to 4 apps on the dock? I should be able to put 5 or 6 apps on the dock if I want to, considering this phone, it's pretty big. So I feel like with Apple, it's the same story. There are some software things they do that just annoy you, but at the same time, the synergy is legit. You can't deny it. So I'll give you an example. A couple of days ago, I uploaded some product shots of the iPhones captured with my Sony camera, and I uploaded those photos to my MacBook. And then later on, I went out for dinner. My colleague at XDA Developers asked me for those photos, but I don't have my MacBook on me. But what I did is I jumped into the file system, jumped into iCloud Drive, and I was able to access my MacBook's files on my iPhone because everything is connected like that. Likewise, if I record a voice memo on my Apple Watch, it will show up on all of these iPhones within like 2 seconds. So it's just very useful all around. If you're immersed in Apple's ecosystem, this is a clear advantage that you just can't get on Android yet. So yeah, that's about it for this video. In a day in the life with the iPhone 13 Pro Max the iPhone 13 mini. I know I focus mostly on this iPhone, but rest assured the experience here is very similar, except battery life, it's not going to be anywhere near as good. And really extreme low light performance is not as good too. But I'll do a separate video on this down the line. So that's about it for now. Thanks for watching. And by the way, once again, the footage right now you're watching is shot with the iPhone 13 Pro. Thanks for watching.